Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jackson, and today we're going to talk about William Wordsworth and about his poem, Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey. So before you listen to this video, it would be really helpful for you if you'll go ahead and get a copy of that printed out so that you can make some notes on that. Because we're going to, as you know, you're going to write a paper about one of the romantic poems that we read, and this is one that you can write your paper about. So if you haven't printed out a copy, stop the video real quickly and go print a copy. It is multiple pages, so you may want to print it front and back. So go get that done, and I'll wait. All right, so we've already talked a little bit during our introduction to British Romanticism about Wordsworth. And it's hard to talk about him without talking about his best friend, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And I know you've already listened to that video so that you know that together they wrote a really important book of poetry called Lyrical Ballads. It was phenomenally successful. It instituted a radical change in the way people approach poetry, and the influence of that continues to touch on what we do today in poetry. So its impact is still ongoing, even though it's been a long time since it was published. Wordsworth lived with his wife and his sister and his 6 children and sometimes some other friends in this small house, Dove Cottage. It's in the Lake District, which is in the northern part of England. And it's still open as a museum. It's quite astonishing to go there. If you ever have the chance, I'd highly recommend that. I've been a couple of times, and it's very moving to go and see where somebody lived and kind of get to experience life through their viewpoint. So this is the front of the house, and then this is the garden. And I've stood in the garden and read his poetry, and because I'm such a big old nerd, I stood there and cried because it's very moving to me, very important to me. So this is the interior. This is Wordsworth and his wife. Eventually, Wordsworth did become the poet laureate. And because he became the poet laureate, that came with some money. And he and his wife were able to move into this house, Rydal Mount. And he lived there until he died. And it's a much bigger house than Dove Cottage, much nicer. But this is also open as a museum. So if you ever get to go to England and get to go up to the Lake District, I'd highly recommend making a trip to see Dove Cottage and Rydal Mount. It's really something to see. So what we're going to talk about today, this is his grave, and there's a monument to him in Poets Corner. What we're going to talk about today is Wordsworth's viewpoint as a poet, and his most famous work, probably Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey. As a poet, Wordsworth kind of strove to write about spots of time, which to him were kind of moments in time that just encapsulated an experience. And I think all of us have those probably. You may, for instance, like in the fall when I smell freshly mown grass and it's just starting to get kind of cooling off just a little bit. To me, that always reminds me of the start of school. And there are other sensory images that each of us carry that remind us of certain time periods in our life. And that's what Wordsworth was talking about when he talked about spots of time. And the poem we're going to look at right now is definitely in that category of a spot of time type of poem. Wordsworth also sometimes called a pantheist. I'm sure that he was raised going to church. His sister wanted him to be a minister. He didn't do that. But he's often called a pantheist, and a pantheist is somebody who sees evidence of a higher power in nature. So while he may not have been a typical religious person per se, the way that we might understand it, to him, nature was evidence that there was more in the universe than just him. So that's what that means. So the poem that we're going to look at, Tintern Abbey is what it's called for short. He wrote after going to see the ruined Abbey, Tintern Abbey, which is in Wales. And Wales, as you can see, is over on the west side of the UK. It's its own little country. It has its own language, which does not sound like English. Prince Charles of England is Prince of Wales. Once he becomes king, Prince William will no doubt become Prince of Wales, and that means that Kate will become Princess of Wales, just as Princess Diana, William's mother, was Princess of Wales. So this is where it's located. All right. And this is the interior of Tintern Abbey. Now, it's a ruined abbey because during the late 16th, 17th century, Henry VIII, and if I've got those dates wrong, I'm sorry, I don't have my notes right in front of me. Henry VIII, he is the British king who had red hair and he was a big, husky guy. You probably know that he had 6 wives and he had 2 of them beheaded. In order to be able to divorce his first wife, the only way he could do that was to break free from the Catholic Church and to form the Anglican Church, or the Church of England. And that also helped to launch the Protestant Reformation. And it's the reason why we have so many Christian denominations, not just because of Henry VIII. It just kind of all works together. But it's why we have so many different Christian denominations. It's why we have Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, all those different things. But when Henry VIII broke away from the Roman Church, from the Catholic Church, he was also able to take the money from these churches, and he was cash poor, so he really needed that money. So the buildings were left to just go to ruin. And, as you can see, this one has the roof is gone. The structure still stands. It's a popular tourist site. But the interesting thing about this poem, and there are lots of interesting things about this poem, is that Wordsworth, aside from the title, he doesn't mention the Abbey at all. He doesn't describe the Abbey. He doesn't say a single word about the Abbey. In fact, if the name of Tintern Abbey weren't in the title of the poem, we might not even know that that's what he was writing about. So I want to show you some more pictures of it. So when he's describing what we're going to be reading, he's really not describing what you're seeing on the screen right now. He's further removed from it, and I doubt that he's this close. He's probably not even this close, or this close, or this close. He's probably really far away because, frankly, he's not that interested in the Abbey itself. What he's interested in is the landscape that surrounds it. So in just a minute, we're going to start reading the poem. And if you want to do a split screen, or if you've got, I hope you have your copy of the poem out, you'll be able to look at this picture while we're reading the poem so that you can refer back to it. He is going to talk about this river, the Y, it's W-Y-E, and we'll see that in the poem. And he's going to talk about the rows of hedges, the hedgerows, and those are just hedges that we see. But he's not concerned with his abbey. Now, I think there's some real irony in that, because Wordsworth is talking about his love of nature, almost his worship of nature. I know that I've told you before that we can't really assume that the speaker and the poet are the same person, but in this particular case, you kind of can. This is a really personal expression. And as I said in our last lecture for the Romantics, that's what they were trying to do, was to put their personal thoughts, their personal reactions, their emotion into what they were writing. And the irony is that here Wordsworth is describing his manifesto, his understanding of life, the way he leads his life, and his credo, his ethics, in the place where people used to worship and where monks would have lived in quiet contemplation. And yet Wordsworth isn't concerned about that abbey. He's concerned about his own quiet contemplation, his own understanding of the meaning of life. There are lots of religious images in this poem, and I will point them out to you as we're reading it. To me, the poem is almost like a prayer, really. It's written in unrhymed iambic pentameter, and that shows us that Wordsworth had a lot of skill as a poet. He did. He was a highly intelligent man and a very skilled and gifted poet, and very, very adept at expressing his emotions in a very evocative way so that we can understand while we're reading his poems. So this is probably my favorite poem of all time. If you don't like it, you're just going to have to lie to me and tell me that you don't. I may not understand what you're saying because I just think it's so incredibly beautiful. So let me switch over for a second and pull them up so that we can look at it together. All right, here it is. And, it's lengthy. It's a lengthy poem for sure. But I think once I read it through to you, that you're going to have a better understanding of it and have a little more fodder to use as if you choose to write your paper about this particular poem. Here we go. 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters. And again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur. Now, notice that I read those lines and I let the punctuation guide me to the end of the line instead of stopping at the end of the line. In poetry, that's called an enjambment, E-N-J-A-M-B-M-E-N-T, an enjambment, where you keep continuing with the line until you get to the punctuation. And that kind of lends to the conversational tone of this poem. So we've started out, it's been 5 years since Wordsworth has been at this location. Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs that on a wild, secluded scene impress thoughts of more deep seclusion and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky. The day has come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts, which at this season with their unripe fruits are clad in one green hue and lose themselves mid groves and copses. When he says that one green hue, it makes me think that, this poem is written in July, in midsummer, but when things first start to bud out, in the springtime, leaves on trees and everything that's budding, they almost look transparent and they all kind of have that same color. And that's what that makes me think of when he says clad in one green hue. Once again, I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild, these pastoral farms. Now I want to stop at that word pastoral. Pastoral means anything that has sheep or shepherds in it. So if you're familiar with the 23rd Psalm from the Bible, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That's a pastoral poem. It uses images and imagery of sheep and shepherding to make the point that the writer is trying to convey. All right. So again, I'm going to start right up here on line 14. Once again, I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild, these pastoral farms green to the very door, and wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees, with some uncertain notice as might seem of vagrant dwellers in houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave, where by his fire the hermit sits alone. Now, when we talked about the introduction to British Romanticism, I pointed out to you that the Romantics were really attracted to hermits as characters because hermits choose, they make a choice to live away from society. And that was really attractive to the Romantics. They viewed city life as corrupt and artificial, and country life and quiet contemplative life was more natural. So certainly, here's a hermit in the poem. I told you they'd show up, and here it is, just in the first little bit of this poem. Let's go down. These beauteous forms, through a long absence, have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye. Now, that's a really kind of convoluted syntax by telling me what something isn't instead of what it is. Well, how can it be a landscape to a blind man's eye? Blind people can't see, but they can imagine. So, what he seems to be saying is even though I haven't been in this setting, I can still close my eyes and see this image. I can still remember it. Now, all of us have memories and things that we think of, and I hope that you have some memories that you think of whenever you're feeling sad or stressed, and that memory is soothing to you in some way. I certainly have lots of things that I think about. I think about holding my grandmother's hand, or the way my mother's perfume smells, or the way she says my name. Um, I think of just certain times that I've spent with my husband or when my son was small, and those things are real soothing to me. And that's kind of what Wordsworth is saying here, too. So, these beauteous forms through a long absence have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye, but oft, he's saying often, in lonely rooms and mid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them in hours of weariness sensations sweet, felt in the blood, and felt along the heart, and passing even into my purer mind with tranquil restoration. See, that's what I meant. He thinks about it whenever he's alone, whenever he's stressed out. Notice that he says when he's in the noise of towns and cities, they think towns and cities are bad. So he needs that image even more when he's in that unnatural setting to remember the nature that surrounds Tintern Abbey and how restorative that is to him. He says, with tranquil restoration. Do you see that right? Tranquil restoration right there. Feelings, too, of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as have no slight or trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. He may start to think of things he hadn't even thought about. Maybe something that didn't seem important at the time, but that becomes important later on. Nor less I trust to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime. Now, I told you in our introductory lecture that we would run into that word sublime. Sublime means it's something that takes you above and out of yourself, away from just the focus of your own experience. Another gift of aspect more sublime, that blessed mood in which the burthen of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. That sincere and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on until the breath of this corporeal frame, and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul. While with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. He's talking about a memory or an experience that can be soothing up until the point that you die. When he's saying this corporeal frame right here, corporeal means your body. So as long as your body is intact, as long as your memory is intact. All right, if this be but a vain belief, yet how oft in darkness and amid the many shapes of joyless daylight, when the fretful stir unprofitable. I really love that line, the fretful stir unprofitable. It's all that junk we worry about all the time. And I know that at the age you are right now, some of the things that you worry about seem really big. And I have really big worries too. Everybody does. It's just a normal thing. But it seems to me that the older I get, the more I realize that the stuff I worry about really isn't that big a deal. And that you can face pretty much anything that happens to you, even things that you don't want to face. You can. So all the worry is, it's fretful. To fret means to worry, to not be able to sleep, to not be able to do anything else because you're so preoccupied. When the fretful stir unprofitable, probably one of my favorite lines from a poem ever, because it describes life. Sometimes life's just crazy. When the fretful stir unprofitable and the fever of the world have hung upon the beatings of my heart, how oft in spirit have I turned to thee, O sylvan Wye. Now, the Wye is that river that was in the picture that we were looking at. Sylvan means wooded, and you could see in the picture that there were lots and lots of trees. There's the Wye. There are all the trees. Oh, sylvan, wooded Wye. There we go. O sylvan Wye, thou wanderer through the woods, how often has my spirit turned to thee! And now with gleams of half-extinguished thoughts, with many recognitions dim and faint, and somewhat of a sad perplexity, the picture of the mind revives again, while here I stand not only with a sense of present pleasure, but with pleasing thoughts that in this moment there is life and food for future years. Now, he's not talking about literal food. He doesn't have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that's going to last forever. He's talking about spiritual food. I'm here looking at this beautiful landscape that I've seen before, that I have learned has come to mean so much to me. And I know that now, while I'm re-experiencing this, that there's going to be even more in this experience that I'll be able to draw from whenever I need that strength. There's food in life for future years. And so I dare to hope, though changed no doubt from what I was when first I came among these hills, when like a roe, and a roe is a deer, when like a roe I bounded o'er the mountains by the sides of the deep rivers and the lonely streams, wherever nature led, more like a man flying from something that he dreads than one who sought the thing he loved. For nature then, the coarser pleasures of my boyish days and their glad animal movements all gone by, to me was all in all. I cannot paint what then I was. He's saying the first time I came here, it was just an experience. I wasn't thinking, wow, this is going to be a really important moment in my life, because you don't know that those moments are going to be important most of the time when you're having them, because you're busy living your life. And later on, you think, wow, that was really a pivotal moment to me. I didn't know it at the time. But he's saying when I first came, I was just here for the experience, and I was just kind of running around. It wasn't like I was seeking this place out. I was running away from home, trying to get away from stuff. Now I'm coming back here purposely. And so I cannot paint what then I was. I've lost some of that perhaps immaturity, youthfulness, lack of experience, lack of perception, lack of awareness of how important this was. I don't know what I was. I've lost touch with that because I've had more experience. And you'll see that happen too as you move through your life. You'll still remember how you felt and who you were, and essentially you'll still be the same. But there'll be parts of you that I know I look back and I think, what was I thinking? Man, what was I thinking back then? I don't know. Just part of being human. All right, let's keep going. The sounding cataract. A cataract is not like the one you have on your eye. It's another word for waterfall. The sounding cataract haunted me like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, and the deep and gloomy wood, their colors and their forms were then to me an appetite, a feeling, and a love that had no need of a remoter charm by thought supplied, nor any interest unborrowed from the eye. He's saying, I just enjoy being outside. Now, Wordsworth was an athletic guy. He loved to skate. He was really tall and slender. He skated into old age. When you go see Dove Cottage, you can see a pair of his skates there. Amazing he didn't fall and crack a hip. Maybe he did. I don't know. But he's just saying, I just liked running around outside. I wasn't thinking that this was going to be a remoter charm. I wasn't thinking. I didn't understand. I didn't know that later on I was going to think about this place as my happy place. He says that time is past, and all its aching joys are now no more, and all its dizzy raptures. Now there are two mercy, I can't think of the word that I'm wanting. Not juxtaposition, but they're the opposite, and I'll think of it after I've gotten through recording this lecture and can't think of a stupid word that should be so obvious to me. But it's that juxtaposition of those two terms that don't belong together. All right. Not for this faint eye, nor mourn, nor murmur. Other gifts have followed. For such loss, I would believe abundant recompense. So, yeah, maybe I've lost my youthfulness, and maybe now when I go hopping around rocks, my knees hurt, or I can't see this the same way for any variety of reasons, or I don't have as much time here, but I've gained some other things. I've gained maturity, I've gained perspective. So for whatever I've lost, I've gained some other things that have been, if not as valuable, perhaps more valuable. All right, so he says, for I have learned to look on nature not as in the hour of thoughtless use, but hearing oftentimes the still, sad music of humanity, nor harsh, nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime, there's that word again, of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. He's discovered his spirituality. He's discovered what moves him, what's important to him, what speaks to him, what motivates him, what keeps him going. Okay? It's that thing that rolls through all things. Therefore, here we are right here. Therefore am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains, and of all that we behold from this green earth, of all the mighty world of eye and ear, both what they have create and what perceive. Well, what did they have create? Sometimes we think we heard something, or we're not sure, or we think we saw something, but we're not sure. And there's a lot of difference between what you see and what you understand, and some people are more perceptive than other people. That's what he's talking about. Well pleased to recognize in nature and the language of the sense the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral being. All right, that's my wall clock, sorry. If you counted, it's 11 o'clock in the morning. So there we go. All right. The anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral being. That's why this is like a prayer. He's saying this, I'm letting you see the inside of me. What is important to me? What moves me as a human, and what I understand it means to be human. Nor perchance, if I were not thus taught, should I the more suffer my genial spirits to decay, for thou art with me here upon the banks of this fair river. Now, this line, for thou art with me, echoes that 23rd Psalm, for thou art with me. And he does that purposely. Now, up until this point, Wordsworth seems to have been speaking just to us, and this seems to be a monologue with nobody else there. But as it happens, his sister Dorothy was with him on this trip. And so this is who he's talking to. Now we discover at this late point in the poem that he's talking to us, but he's also talking to his sister, and they were very, very close. She never married, and she lived with Wordsworth and his wife until she died. So, they were together forever. So it says, for thou art with me here upon the banks of this fair river, thou my dearest friend, my dear, dear friend. And in thy voice I catch the language of my former heart and read my former pleasures in the shooting lights of thy wild eyes. He's getting to re-experience his first experience by watching his sister see this scene for the first time. You may have experienced that with brothers, sisters, cousins, somebody. If you have children someday, that's part of the fun of having a kid, is getting to see them see something for the first time, see snow for the first time, or go play in the water for the first time. Or that's just it's a really moving thing. You'll see what I mean. You'll have some opportunities to do that even if you don't have children. It's pretty amazing. It's one of the best things ever. All right, so he's getting to get this vicarious re-experience through watching his sister. Oh, yet a little while may I behold in thee what I was once, my dear, dear sister. And this prayer I make, knowing that nature never did betray the heart that loved her. 'Tis her privilege through all the years of this our life to lead from joy to joy. For she can so inform the mind that is within us, so impress with quietness and beauty, and so feed with lofty thoughts, that neither evil tongues, rash judgments, nor the sneers of selfish men, nor greetings where no kindness is, nor all the dreary intercourse of daily life shall e'er prevail against us or disturb our cheerful faith, that all which we behold is full of blessings. So he's saying, you're going to go through life, and sometimes life stinks, but there are a lot of blessings in it too. And thinking about this scene is going to help you to remember that. Therefore, let the moon shine on thee in thy solitary walk, and let the misty mountain winds be free to blow against thee. And in after years, when these wild ecstasies shall be matured into sober pleasure, when thy mind shall be a mansion for all lovely forms, the memory be as a dwelling place for all sweet sounds and harmonies. Oh, then, if solitude or fear or pain or grief should be thy portion, with what healing thoughts of tender joy wilt thou remember me and these my exhortations. An exhortation is somebody's kind of command to you, Dorothy, pay attention, or look over there. Don't miss out on that. His direction, his advice. Nor perchance, if I should be where I no more can hear thy voice, nor catch from thy wild eyes these gleams of past existence, wilt thou then forget that on the banks of this delightful stream we stood together, and that I, so long a worshipper of nature, hither came unwearied in that service? Rather say with warmer love, oh, with far deeper zeal of holier love. Nor wilt thou then forget that after many wanderings, many years of absence, these steep woods and lofty cliffs and this green pastoral landscape were to me more dear, both for themselves and for thy sake. All right, that's Tintern Abbey. Can't wait to see what you guys come up with the discussion. Thanks for listening, and we'll come back with another lesson another time. Okay.